If you're watching this video, you're still in a competitive fantasy football league, which means you need to take advantage of your waiver wire. So in this video, we'll be breaking down the 10 players you need to be adding before your friends do. And it starts with the running back. We haven't had a lot of running back ads lately. Honestly, these last couple of weeks, running backs have been staying healthy, but the rookie running back for the Denver Broncos, Audric Estime, his role continued to get larger in week 11, and we kind of had rumors of this heading into the week. Because last Sunday, we got reports from Sean Payton himself that said Audric Estime is expected to see an increased workload moving forward. Okay, now coaches do say this a lot, and sometimes an increased workload goes from the guy playing just like 2 or 3 snaps to now he's seeing like 4 carries, right? Well, at least in this game, we saw the larger workload for Estime. If you can see this first column of numbers right here, this is the snap counts. There's 57 total snaps for the Broncos in this game. 7 went to Jaleel McLaughlin, who, believe it or not, actually started the game, the first snap of the game. Javonte Williams played on the first couple of drives a decent amount, 16 snaps, but Audric Estime led the way with 26 snaps. Now, there is a chance that this was sort of a hot hand approach because Jaleel McLaughlin started the game, because Javonte was seeing a target or reception on the first drive, a carry on the second drive, but then Estime had a bunch of carries of like 5+ yards to start off. So maybe he just had the hot hand. So overall, when you break it down, Javonte Williams, these 16 snaps was just 28% of the snaps. And you scroll over to his usage, he had only 1 carry in this game and 2 targets. So 3 total opportunities. So here's the thing. If there's not some undisclosed injury that wasn't reported, because nothing as of this recording has been reported, it seems like they just kind of said, Javonte, we're tired of you at this point. And instead, they gave the 5th round rookie Audric Estime the majority of the work. In this game, he played nearly 50% of the snaps. He saw 14 of his 17 backfield carries. So 14 out of 17 backfield carries. Now look, still there's other running backs involved. McLaughlin, there's Javonte Williams. So it's not like it's just only Estime. Again, he didn't even play 50% of the snaps. But if we got the hints that he was going to play more, and now he's actually getting those, this is the proper trend to actually add a player. Now, your friends might not think Estime is a great ad, and I understand that because he only had 53 total yards in this game on 14 rush attempts. He averaged 4 yards per carry, just 5 fantasy points. But let's keep in mind, this was a game on the road against the Chiefs, which is one of the, if not the toughest matchups, right up there with the Ravens, the Lions, as a tough run defense to go up against. And Estime is a guy who, he only played 50% of the snaps and still saw 14 carries. In a game where Denver is actually having a beneficial matchup, playing with a decent lead or in a neutral situation like they have been most weeks, you might get 16 carries out of Estime, and that's where you can start to break off some longer runs in better matchups. Now, if you're not familiar with Estime, he's a downhill, powerful runner. He was doing that the past 3 years in Notre Dame, and it's carried over into the NFL. He's already broken 7 tackles across his 29 NFL touches this year, which is a 24% rate, and that's very good. Now, here's the quick rundown on Estime. He's 5'11", 221 pounds, so that's great. He has the size, he has the strength. He doesn't really have the speed overall, but it's not terrible. It was bad at the NFL Combine, but he ran a better 40 time in his pro day. And then this is where he broke out. Last year at Notre Dame, he was a workhorse, 210 carries. He had over 1,300 yards rushing. You go over to his receptions, actually added a decent amount with 142 receiving yards. So you had a 1,500 yard season, a massive 18 touchdowns in 2023 last year at Notre Dame. Really, he's known for his ability to produce after contact, which is not something that Denver backs have done for most of this year, and definitely not consistently. And the other reason why I do believe Sean Payton will like this guy is because of this right here. He just doesn't fumble. If you look at all of his carries, 210 carries last year, 156 the year before that, 7 in his first year of college, only 1 career fumble in his entire life. Now, the one thing I will say, though, is that there is still this competition. If we pull it up right here, there are still these 3 running backs. I think Estime is trending in the right direction, but Sean Payton, historically, every stop he's been and everywhere he goes, he uses at least 2 and sometimes 3 running backs. So this could just be a messy backfield moving forward. Javonte Williams, fantasy managers, a couple of weeks back when he was producing every week for you, when he had the big Thursday night game, it seems like, barring an injury to Estime or McLaughlin, that those days are over. Now, the next guy we got to talk about is Jaylen Warren, and I know it. I know I could hear it already. People are saying, Jaylen Warren, he's been owned in my league. He was a 10th, 11th round pick. I get it, but he's available in over 50% of leagues right now, so we're going to talk about him, and then we'll talk about some players who are not available in as many leagues. You know, like Audric Estime that we just talked about, available in over 90% of leagues. But as for Jaylen Warren, his status is very interesting moving forward. He had a crucial fumble, of course, in the Steelers game. They ended up still winning that one, but if we pull this up right here, Najee Harris kind of quietly left this game with an ankle injury. He did come back for like a final drive, but we've seen plenty of times this year running backs come back, like a Joe Mixon earlier this year, have an ankle injury, play a drive, and then miss a month of the season. So this is an injury we have to monitor, because every single week now, it's like Jaylen Warren's usage since his returning from his knee injury in week 6 is getting better. They come out of the bye week, he plays 35 snaps to the 37 for Najee. Again, Najee missed about a drive in this game because of the injury, but still, it's about a 50-50 split. Jaylen Warren has 14 carries and 2 targets, no targets, and 21 carries for Najee. Again, Warren saw like 5 or 6 carries on the drive or 2 where Najee was out, so this was going to be a much more diverse, or not even diverse, a wider split in the overall carries in this one. Najee was probably going to see 24 carries, Warren probably 10, but Najee did get banged up, and that is why we're bringing this up. Damn, oh damn, my voice just cracked. That's what happens when it's 4 a.m., beautiful people, and you had a long Sunday because, you know, the sports and the reviewing and getting this video ready for you. So overall, Warren plays about 50% of the snaps, 46% to be exact in this game. He sees 16 opportunities, 16 touches, and he does what he always does. He produces 95 total yards in this one. He's efficient, averaging 6 yards per touch. That's what this guy does. And now over his last 3 games, Warren has played 50% of the Steelers snaps and averaged 14.3 opportunities per game. I mean, those are really strong numbers. 14 opportunities per game on the waiver wire. In a lot of leagues that I'm in, I would die for that right now because there's just been nothing out there in terms of running backs that you can get the past month of the season on the waivers. And he plays on a team that's running the second most times per game right now. We know Arthur Smith, he wants to run behind this offensive line, big tight end and Darnell Washington, use Najee, use Warren. So this is a good environment for Warren to be in, especially if he starts to see more usage. And the other area where he's really contributing lately is the routes run department. You can see right here, he's ran 15 routes in this game compared to just 8 for Najee Harris. Heading into this game, Warren was seeing 100% of the 2-minute offense snaps. That continued in this game, and he was seeing about 15% more routes run than Najee. It's leading to more targets overall for Warren compared to Najee. So he's quietly taking that usage away from Najee, and I know Najee scored again in this one and had over 20 carries, but this schedule for them moving forward, if we were to pull it up as just a pure running back, is pretty brutal. Like, the matchup against the Ravens is tough. Matchup against the Browns can go either way depending on the health of that defensive line. The Bengals matchup, the Bengals defensive line is getting better, but that's your easiest matchup moving forward because then you get the Browns again and the Eagles again. Like, this is a brutal, I believe if you scroll even more, you get the Ravens and you get the Chiefs. I mean, these are legitimately, you have to face the Ravens and the Chiefs 3 times in the next 5 or 6 games. Those are the best run defenses in the NFL, and then the Browns after that is still tough. So just keep that in mind when you're spending some fab on Warren if he's available, but Warren's pass catching abilities does give him the opportunity to get bailed out with a 3 or 4 reception game. Now, as always, I do get questions in the comments, and I get people reaching out, okay, well, who do I add? What are the tiers? What are the rankings? Who should I prioritize my fab on? Well, that's why I made this waiver wire tiers tool right here. It's linked down below in my fantasy blueprint. You can see for this week, this is the quarterbacks and the tight ends. If I was to scroll over, I will save that for the people who have the blueprint. You'd see 20 running backs, 20 wide receivers as well, all ranked in tiers order for how you should be spending your fab budget. It's just one of the tools that you get in my fantasy blueprint where you get a bunch of other tools, a trade calculator tool or a trade tool basically for the values. You get waiver wire or rankings as you see right there, rankings for the week upcoming, as well as game by game notes for every player and a whole lot more. And you can get these tools in my fantasy blueprint with 21,000 other people. How to get access, you just follow these 2 simple steps. They'll be linked in the description below, and it'll take you here where you sign up through one of my 2 partners, either Underdog or Better, whichever one you want, because when you sign up through them, you get the blueprint this year absolutely risk-free through one of our 2 partners. Now, what does that mean? It's risk-free because it's a one-time payment of just $10, and if you don't make your fantasy playoffs, just reach out and you get that $10 right back. But here's the important part. This is the final week that we're doing the fantasy blueprint. It is the final week, right? We're in week 11 right now. Fantasy playoffs are coming closer, so this is the final week that we will be taking on new members for the fantasy blueprint. Otherwise, if you're in, you're good to go, but anybody new, this is your last week to get in, so be sure to click the link in the description below or scan the QR code that's popping up on the screen right now so you can get the fantasy blueprint with 21,000 others to help you win your league. Next man up, we got to talk about the wide receiver. It's Adonai Mitchell, the 2nd round pick out of Texas for the Colts, who was somebody you have to consider now on waivers heading into the week because this right here, like, he was already somebody that people were picking up, but he's still out there in over 80% of leagues. Michael Pittman is dealing with not only his back injury that almost put him on IR a couple weeks back, but now a finger injury. And this back injury is important because he was able to actually play in week 9, but he did not look like himself, and then he ends up missing week 10. So there's a chance that this limits him or actually keeps him out even more moving forward. So this opened the door for Adonai Mitchell to see more playing time, and that's exactly what he did. Because according to PFF, as you can see right here, Mitchell led the team in snaps. He played on 60 snaps. That's 94% of the snaps. Led the team running 37 routes. There was only 39 you could have ran, so he was basically on the field nonstop, and this led to a 6-target performance. Pretty good performance overall for a downfield explosive receiver. He ends up turning these 6 targets into 6 catches for 71 yards. As I mentioned, he's explosive. He had multiple explosive plays of 10+ yards in this game. Exactly what you want to see out of a rookie when they say he's going to play more. He does play more, and he actually produces. Now, Mitchell came into this game ranking 4th in the entire NFL in average depth of target. On average, how far is his targets downfield? 16 yards downfield. That continued in this game. He had a couple of deep targets, but the thing that I found interesting was we saw a little bit more usage for Mitchell in the intermediate parts, even somewhat the short parts of the field, but the intermediate parts of the field, 10, 12 yards downfield, instead of just deep balls downfield that, you know, are pretty 50-50 or hit or miss, and you could have boom fantasy weeks, but some down ones. Well, we actually saw this number in this past week come down a little bit, which led to a more consistent performance where he caught all 6 of his passes. If on average your targets are going 16 to 18 to 20 yards downfield, you're probably not catching all 6 of your targets. It's hard to complete those passes. So I would look at this as a good thing. Now, what do you need to know about Mitchell? Well, as I mentioned, he's an explosive, fast downfield receiver, and here's what he did at college. In his first year in college as a very young player in 2021, 15 games, he was actually playing at Georgia, 29 catches for 426 yards. You might look at that 57 targets and say, oh, that's not good production. But then you have to keep in mind, he was playing with Ladd McConkey, who we see now is a great receiver for the Chargers, Brock Bowers, already one of the best tight ends in the NFL, Jermaine Burton, who's a wide receiver for the Bengals, starting to see a little bit more usage, and even George Pickens. Yes, that George Pickens he was playing with in 2021 as a 19-year-old at Georgia. And during that time, you still saw this fella, Adonai Mitchell, see over 400 yards and earn 57 targets. Mitchell then got injured in 2022. He transferred to Texas in 2023, where he had his breakout year. Once again, he ends up putting up some nice numbers here, 55 catches, 845 yards, and you might say this is not great numbers overall. He did find the end zone a bunch, the most in his conference, but then you have to keep in mind, he was competing with a 4th-round pick in Jatavion Sanders, who's producing very nicely for the Panthers right now, and a 1st-round pick, Xavier Worthy, who was one of the best wide receivers in college football last year, and he was still able to put up nearly 1,000 yards. I'd consider Mitchell to be a pretty quality route runner, but definitely somebody who just separates and is dynamic downfield. Like once he actually starts getting ahead of steam, as you can see right here on Player Profiler, his athletic metrics, 4.34 40 time, that's 98th percentile, top 2% of all time to attend the combine. His burst is 96th percentile. I mean, this guy is just absolutely dynamic. He's dynamic with quality size as well. It's not like he's this 170-pound receiver. He's 6'2" and 205 pounds. A legit size wide receiver with legit speed. This is somebody that I want to see more volume than just 6 targets moving forward, but I'll take those 6 targets we got this last week, and I'll take it if Joe Flacco continues to be the starter, which the organization has repeatedly said. So Mitchell is an ad for me at the wide receiver position, and another ad is Cam Akers. I think he has to be an ad because this past week, Cam Akers, who's now on the Vikings, no longer on the Texans, keep that in mind. Well, now, this past week, Aaron Jones left the game. He did return with a chest injury, but we've been saying this multiple times this year on this channel. Aaron Jones has left games with injury and then later returned 4 times this season. 4 different times this year, Aaron Jones has left. A 29.5, nearly 30-year-old running back. I think he turns 30 in December. Eventually, he's not going to come back, or maybe he'll be limited. And heck, this chest injury could keep him out of practices and make it so that Cam Akers is actually going to see more touches moving forward. And here's the thing. It is Cam Akers as the backup. It used to be Ty Chandler, not anymore. They acquired Cam Akers, who was on this team once in the past before tearing his Achilles last year. And you can see right here, 26 snaps compared to just 12 snaps for Ty Chandler. You go over to the carries, 13 carries and 1 target for Cam Akers, just 4 for Ty Chandler. It's Cam Akers is the clear backup on this team. Now, we did see Cam Akers with the Texans. He was never all that great, but also that's a terrible offensive line. Somewhat better offensive line with the Vikings. I would say overall a better offense this year. So if he was to see more usage, I would get a little bit more optimism out of it. Next man up is Marquez Valdes-Scantling, who will probably be a popular waiver wire ad this upcoming week for a few reasons, right? The first reason is that Chris Olave, before the game, his concussion officially put him on IR. He'll miss at least 4 games. We know Rashid Shaheed is also done for the season. So there's just not a lot of wide receivers left in this room, right? Like you were looking at it coming into this week as Cedric Wilson, who was also banged up, Mason Tipton, an undrafted rookie who has like 4.3 speed but not much else to his game, Marquez Valdes-Scantling recently signed like a week ago, like nothing else here. Bub Memes is banged up, Equinemius St. Brown, Amon-Ra's brother, has never been the greatest of wide receivers at separation, usually like a raw player there, which is exactly why the Saints had to make a move, and they weren't in the trade discussions because I don't think they're looking at themselves as a playoff contender, but Marquez Valdes-Scantling to sign with the Saints, this happened a couple of weeks back, and he finally got some playing time this past week. And not only did he get playing time, according to PFF, led the team with 29 snaps, 18 routes run, and 3 targets. Yes, 3 targets actually led this wide receiver room. But here's the thing, 29 snaps, like that wasn't great. He barely played 55% of the snaps in this game. They rotated through 5-6 different receivers, multiple tight ends, and 2 tight end sets. But your league mates won't see that. They'll just see this right here on the waiver wire as the highest scoring player, right? He was a top 5 wide receiver on the week. I believe the only guys, actually, I think the only guys above him was one, Jamar Chase, who put up 50 points heading into Monday Night Football. This video, of course, since it's out on Monday morning, is out before Monday Night Football. So the wide receiver 2 on the week because he put up 109 yards on 2 targets. But again, he only had 109 yards and 2 touchdowns. He only had 3 targets in this game. 15% of the targets in a game where your team's only throwing the ball like 25 times, which is something they probably want to do every single week if they can moving forward. Or at least until Chris Olave comes back in 4 to 6 weeks, whatever it takes. Derek Carr in this game only threw the ball 25 times, compared to if you go down to the rush attempts, 27 rush attempts. And oh yeah, he threw the ball 25 times. Let's look at where the targets actually went. 6 targets went to his running back. Okay, 6 targets go to his running back. He had 4 throwaways in this game. So now you're breaking it down and you really only have 15 targets for everybody else, You get 3 going to Juwan Johnson. The number 2 option in the passing attack for this game was Juwan Johnson. He's a tight end, right? You get 2 going to another tight end in Foster Moreau. You get 2 going to a running back in Jordan Mims. So you add this all up, and you have 21 actual targets up for grabs. There's 4 throwaways in this game. 21 actual targets up for grabs, and literally 15 of them are going to tight ends and running backs. And sadly, that's how gross the Saints offense is right now without Rashid Shaheed, with a banged up Derek Carr, with a bad offensive line, and now without Chris Olave. So I can't actually in good faith sit here and tell you that Marquez Valdes-Scantling, somebody who we know who this guy is, right? This is a guy who eventually will have a big gain here or there, but for the most part, he has sketchy hands. He's not really a separator, and he only wins downfield, which leads to a lot of inconsistent play. This dude who had, I believe I saw a stat on Twitter, he only had 1 catch on a ball that won 20 plus yards since 2021. He had 2 of those this past week. That doesn't mean that's a trend that's starting. That means it's an outlier. So I'm here to say, don't blow your fab budget on Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Of course, if you're in a league where there's just nothing available, sure, go throw some dollars out there, but you're not spending $20 on MVS. I would honestly spend 2 to 5, which means you're probably not getting him in most leagues, but you don't need him. Most weeks moving forward, he's going to have 1 catch for 15 yards. Maybe he gets 2 catches for 30 yards. They're not both going to translate to big touchdowns. Next man up is rookie Pearsall, who I feel like we've been talking about for a month now because I'm still talking about him because he's available in over 75% of fantasy leagues right now. We continue to discuss him because heading into the bye week, this is somebody that I was like, you know what? The usage has to look good on this guy. Brandon Ayuk's done for the season. Even if he's the wide receiver 3 on this team with CMC coming back, there's going to be some value there. And what did we get this upcoming week? We got Ricky Pearsall operating as the wide receiver 3. Juwan Jennings was operating in the Brandon Ayuk role kind of as the wide receiver 1, believe it or not, over Deebo Samuel. That translated to 11 targets for Jennings, 6 for Deebo, but also 6 for Ricky Pearsall, who did run 30 routes, was out there often as the slot wide receiver. And this translated to him catching 4 of these 6 targets. He had the big touchdown in this game, 73 yards and a touchdown. This is now back-to-back games with 70 total yards and at least 4 opportunities, 4 catches, 17 fantasy points in this one. This was as good of a matchup as you'll get against a bad Tampa Bay Buccaneers secondary, arguably the worst in the NFL. But there's still no denying that this guy literally just got shot less than 3 months ago, and now he's only played 3 NFL games, and in 2 of those, he saw at least 70 yards and has looked really good. And I get it. These dudes are now finally healthy outside of course, Ayuk. Christian McCaffrey came back and saw his normal role of getting like 90% of the opportunities, right? Juwan Jennings looked great as the wide receiver 1 on this team. Deebo still looks banged up, but he's obviously contributing. Kittle found the end zone again and continues to put up yards after the catch, right? So like in a real world, if these guys are healthy, if CMC, Kittle, Deebo are all healthy, heck, even Juwan Jennings now, who not only he looks like a great receiver, but contributes in the blocking game, then you're looking at Ricky Pearsall on most plays being at best like the 3rd, 4th, or even 5th option. So the point is to temper your expectations here, but there's also a chance that Ricky Pearsall, their 1st round rookie receiver, who again was just shot less than 3 months ago and dealt with an injury, there's also a chance that this guy, who as I mentioned put up 70 plus total yards the last time we saw him before the bye week, he might just be that good. He might just be 1st round pick worthy that good, and he actually has to earn targets, and he just starts stealing them away from Juwan Jennings. Maybe he starts stealing them away a little bit from Deebo Samuel, who's been banged up all season long. So there's at least an opportunity there that I don't think he should be on 75% of waiver wires in 12 plus team leagues. He needs to be added in all of them. Another guy who could be added in a lot of leagues is Gus Edwards, because I know a lot of you are just thirsty for running backs right now because they're not popping up on the waivers because no running backs are getting hurt, knock on wood, right now. Gus Edwards returned in week 10, but more importantly, Gus Edwards returned in week 10, and Kamani Vidal, the rookie running back for the Chargers, who's seen some playing time in the last couple of weeks, he was a healthy scratch, which tells you all you need to know. It speaks volumes about how they view Vidal versus Gus Edwards. They like Edwards a lot more. And I mean, it makes sense. Vidal, like, he had his opportunities the past month, and he was only averaging like 2.5 yards per touch, like not great overall, or yards per carry. And Gus Edwards, like, hasn't been all that much better, but in terms of just trusting this guy more, a veteran, somebody that you actually put some money behind this offseason compared to Kamani Vidal, late round rookie, makes sense to give him some more work now that he's coming off of his injury. And honestly, like, look, I don't think he's going to win new leagues, Gus Edwards, although I wouldn't doubt if later down the stretch he sees some more work, but he's somebody that is a decent stash for 8 to 12 touches on your roster. Because he came back this past week and J.K. Dobbins saw the majority of the snaps, 39, but Gus Edwards saw 14 snaps. But here's the crazy part. On his 14 snaps, he got 10 carries. Now, they can't do this every week because it's kind of a tell. If Gus Edwards is on the field, he's probably just getting a handoff here, but 10 carries, and he actually, despite people knowing he was getting the ball, he produced. He put up over 50 yards in this game. It was his best game on the season, averaging 5.5 yards per carry. But the problem Gus Edwards might have moving forward is this right here, and this is the same for J.K. Dobbins, and why I was telling you to trade this guy away a couple of weeks back. One, because I didn't think his role was as good or his explosiveness, and 2, because of this end of season schedule. Matchups against an improving Bengals defensive line. The Ravens is tough. The Chiefs, the Broncos. I mean, yes, you have a nice matchup against the Bucks in here, an average matchup against the Falcons in here, but for the most part, the rest of the way, this is a really tough stretch for this team. That being said, the waiver wire is very thin right now. If Gus Edwards is literally the only running back with a pulse on that, I do think he's worth $2 to $3 to $4. If J.K. Dobbins was to miss a game, I think you can get a 16 to 18 to 20 carry game out of Gus Edwards. Now, this next man up is a rookie who continues to see pretty good usage in his offense. Just saw over a 30% target share, but before we get there, if you're not subscribed to the channel, just hit the subscribe button quick. It's a gentleman's agreement. If you're up to the video this far and you're watching, you find it interesting, helpful, whatever it might be, just double check that you have the subscribe button hit. It takes a lot of time and effort to make these videos. All you got to do to repay that is hit subscribe. So there we go. We shake on it, the gentleman's agreement. All right, so now we go to that rookie. He just saw 32% target share. Yes, the Panthers wide receiver over in Germany was Jaylen Warren, who's coming off of a game where it wasn't that great. In week 9, he caught just 2 balls, 36 yards, 3 targets, and a decent matchup against the Saints when they didn't have Marshawn Lattimore. Okay, so like all of that is in general like not good, right? But he ends up bouncing back this past week in Germany because they traded away Jonathan Mingo, who was taking away some of his snaps in previous weeks, and right away Coker plays 53 snaps. That is a season high in snaps, 88% of the snaps. Runs a 26 of a possible 28 routes. So he's out there 93% of the routes, and since he's out there more, he's earning targets more. He earned 8 targets, double the amount of any other player on the team in this game. A 32% target share is pretty crazy, but it only led to 3 catches for 41 yards. He was held, I believe, catchless in the second half of this game in a nice matchup against the Giants, so he only gets 7 fantasy points, but I do think he's worth picking up because this is a young, exciting player who's now had multiple weeks, 2 out of his last 3 games of earning an elite target share of at least 25%. This past one, 32%, something I believe only Diontae Johnson has done on this team this year. 6'1", 208 pounds overall, so you get the nice size, you get some good speed to him as well. Look, this is like an undrafted free agent out of Holy Cross. You're not going to get any college numbers seeming legit because he was facing guys at Holy Cross. The other piece to point out here is that Adam Thielen has been close to returning from his hamstring injury, which has just been a terrible hamstring injury for the guy because it's kept him out for 2 months now, but he was close to returning. But this is a 34-year-old receiver. If he does return, I wouldn't be shocked if Adam Thielen, again, a 34-year-old receiver, does start to see playing time, as he was Bryce Young's favorite target last season, was a favorite target earlier this year for about a game or 2 before Adam Thielen got hurt. But there's also just a chance that they say, hey, we have our young first-round pick in Xavier Legette. We have another rookie in Jaylen Warren. These guys can be our future at wide receiver. Why don't we let them play? Even David Moore, who's like a field stretcher for them right now, why don't we let these guys play instead of 34-year-old Adam Thielen? My guess is Thielen goes back into the slot, and if Thielen's going to play in the slot, he will start to soak up some targets away from these guys, which is somewhat of a concern, but I still want to stash Coker just to see what actually happens moving forward. Friendly reminder that you should be adding Elijah Moore, who's available in over 90% of fantasy leagues right now, and he's coming out of his bye week, and look, he's put up pretty good numbers in the last 3 games without Amari Cooper. He's averaged 9.3 targets per game, and you can see that right here according to Fantasy Life. These 3 weeks, 7, 8, and 9, those weeks, 2 of them with Jameis Winston, 1 of them without, but all 3 without Amari Cooper, a 21% target share, is second on the team behind Cedric Tillman. And if you scroll over a little bit, the average depth of target right here, the ADOT, how often his targets, where they are, 9.8 yards downfield, so nearly 10 yards downfield for Elijah Moore is good. It's not like he's just getting these gimmicky targets like he was getting for the Jets for some time. He's being worked downfield a decent amount, and that's going to lead to some big plays. Now, the last time we saw him before the bye week, he only had 3 catches for 28 yards in a very tough matchup against the Chargers, but he did earn 9 targets in that one. And then he went on bye, so a lot of people already dropped him. He wasn't on waivers, or he wasn't on rosters in a lot of leagues to begin with, but so many people dropped him since he went on the bye week. But this guy is still available in 90+% of leagues and deserves to be added based on the volume he's seeing. A quick hitter here for Rashad Bateman, just to remind you, Thursday Night Football, he had another really big game. It was a tough first half, but in the second half, he came alive. He ends up catching 6 of 8 targets, 8 targets, more good volume for him. Yes, a nice matchup against Cincinnati in what was a shootout, but finds the end zone, puts up 17.5 fantasy points. He just continues to produce. Now, here's the thing. The Ravens secondary is so bad that there might be a lot of weeks where the Ravens have to throw to keep up more than they want to. And yes, Diontae Johnson is there, and he hasn't had a good shake of it because he's had 2 weeks of just short weeks since he joined the team and then Thursday Night Football, so he hasn't had a lot of practices right now. Give him a week or so to practice, and then we'll see what his involvement on this team is. Will it take away from Rashad Bateman? That's yet to be seen, but at least for right now, until we know that answer, I'll be stashing Rashad Bateman. You could also stash Khalil Herbert, another player who played on Thursday Night Football, because it seems like Zach Moss is now done for the season. They traded a 7th-round pick for Khalil Herbert, so he looks like he's going to be their RB2. Now, in this past game, he only had 2 snaps. A crazy 71 snaps went on Thursday Night Football to Chase Brown, but this really shouldn't shock anybody. Khalil Herbert joined the team like a day before that. He didn't have any practice. Chase Brown was balling out, so why not give him the opportunities? I expect this to be still RB1 usage for Chase Brown, but probably closer to 20 to 30% of the snaps in future weeks for Khalil Herbert. And if Brown was to miss time, Herbert's a quality back and can actually produce. And finally, another quick hitter here is for Dawson Knox, the Bills tight end, because he could be a potential tight end 1 moving forward for this team. We have to see what happens with that knee injury for Dalton Kincaid. He was able to come back, then he left again, and then he was doubtful to return. So tracking the injury of Dalton Kincaid, this is a guy who's been seeing 5 to 10 targets basically every week in the middle of the field at the tight end position. So if Dawson Knox had to step up for that role, he would be a lot of weeks a top 12 to top 15 tight end in fantasy. So these have been the players that you need to add before your friends do and before week 11 begins. And now later in the week, we'll have some of the trade videos for the running backs and receivers popping up. But for right now, best of luck, everybody. Go dominate your waivers, and I'll see you all in the next one.